Hi, I'm Rod. Welcome back to the Orca Shop. And this is episode 23 of building the PT11. In this episode, there's just going to be a few small parts that are going to be glued into place before we can get on to varnishing and painting. Time to apply the final skim coat. So we're going to roll this on, tip it off just the same way we did on the inside of the fore section prior to putting the deck on. And again, the idea here is put the shine back on, and then we're going to do a light scuff sand for varnish later. So you're ready to go there. So here I'm just using a foam brush to get in some of the corners where I could not get with the roller. And once the inside and the top sides are all coated, I'm just going to tip it all off with the same foam brush to smooth it all out as best as possible. Okay, time to install the skeg. I sanded all the sides, made it nice and smooth, done a dry fit. And now I'm just going to prime the edge of the bare plywood here. In this case I'm going to use some epoxy with some fast hardener. That'll set up a little faster for me. Just let that soak in. Meanwhile I'll thicken up the remaining epoxy. Okay, just putting a little bit of thickened epoxy on the bottom of the skeg. Put in the boat and use some screws to pull it down from the inside. So with the boat upside down, I've scuff sanded the area where the skeg will fit, and I'm just going to place it in. Then crawl underneath and screw it down. I'm just using drywall screws, which I have sprayed with WD-40 to ensure they don't break off inside. These 3 screws screwed into the tongues with the blocks will just suck that keel down nicely, and then we'll just make sure it's lined up before we do anything drastic and leave it there. And then we'll make sure we have a straight edge on here, showing that it's fairly straight, just not touching into my thickened epoxy. I just need something to hold that down. Clean up the squeeze out, and a little later there'll be a small fillet added. So I'm just going to put some weight on top of there. So I just need to push the tip down. I've got a block of wood here with some packing tape on it just so it does not stick. And And then I'm just going to put a bucket of heavy clamps on that to just force it down, and we'll let that settle. Well, we're getting down to the final bits and pieces that will go into the PT11. Today's task will be to install the alignment clips. These are used to sort of align the boat up cleanly and nicely before trying to thread in the bolts that hold it together so there's no cross threading or stripping. We'll be putting in the rear seat cleats. They are going to be glued to the two bulkhead panels on the back, so I'm just set up to do that. And the last thing we'll do will be to install the rowing blocks onto the outwails in the proper positions. So all of this will be done by gluing pieces down with epoxy. Okay, time to install the alignment clips. So the little blocks on here, I've sanded it down so that it is flush as possible with the forward deck. Put a little block or a little piece of sticky tape on there, slide it up to the edge but not riding up. So with the clip held in place, I'm just going to start my pilot holes with a self-centering drill bit so that we know the hole is exactly where we want it, in the center. And we'll do the same for the other side. And with the clip removed, I'm just going to drill larger size with my depth set on. Okay, with the back seat cleats, the top of the cleat should be 7/8 of an inch down, so I'm going to use my little combination square here. I've measured the distance to make a few marks by resting that on there and then making a mark so that it's going to be level with the top. Then I'm just going to use a straight edge to join those marks. Oh, without it moving, of course. Onto the tape, makes for a nice crisp line. And then the cleat itself should be about 3/4 of an inch from the end. So we're going to go right about there. I'll make a mark. And then on both ends here, just so I know where to put it back in. And we'll do that for both sides. And then I'll take the cleats over to my drill press, measure a couple inches from the end of either one, and punch a couple of holes through. And those holes will be used to put some screws through to hold it in place while epoxy sets. Okay, so now holding my cleat in position where it was before, I'm just going to make a good mark and drive these in to the bulkhead flotation tank just until they get a bite. Then with a very sharp razor blade, I'm going to come through here and cut through the tape. So the tape perimeter will stay on, clean up any squeeze out. And we can remove the block, remove the cleat. And if we cut well enough, we should be able to remove this piece of masking tape. Voila. So there are two rowing stations on the PT11. First, according to the plans, the center of the hole is 2 inches back from the forward edge of the bulkhead. So we go 2 inches back, and the second is 22 inches back. In there somewhere. So I set my combination square for just a hair over 3/4 of an inch. Just draw a line through there so I can center. Same on the rear one and on the other side. I can also, where my mark, build a nice crosshair there. And for each block, I'm going to clamp this down, centering over the hole, and using the holes that are pre-drilled that I can kind of see through there, that these 2 holes are on the center line mark. I'm going to clamp this down so it's not going to move, because I want to draw a pencil line around there to cut the tape out. And I'll do this for all 4 positions. Okay, while they're still in place, I think I can just do a quick trim with a razor blade around most of the block. Remove the block and peel up the tape. Now we're going to just drill a few holes for clips that will hold the trunk cap down. Trunk cap being, of course, boats in tow. We don't need the boat filling up with water. So I can use the center line, which is down here, giving a tiny gap, and just start a hole there. Okay, switch to a larger drill, and then I'm just going to drill down here, and I've got my depth set here at 3/4 of an inch. Don't want to go any further than that, or I'm going to drill right through the cleat underneath. And those holes will get filled with epoxy, and a smaller hole drilled in later. So another piece of hardware not included in the kit, but that the owner wanted on the boat, is this oar lock. So this is by Edson Oar Lock, as in O-A-R-L-O-K, and literally we're going to drill a hole through here. This would go down, drop through the hole, and they're able to just put a lock on there so they can lock their oars into the boat when not in use, on shore, whatever. We don't want to be losing your oars. So what I'm going to end up doing is drilling a small hole through here, work away to big enough that I can fill the hole with thickened epoxy, and then we'll drill a hole big enough for the Edson lock to go through. Next is to put the foot braces in. There's 4 per side, and they provide us with a pattern. So this goes up to the bulkhead here, so we can tape this in place. We're going to tape well along the bottom edge here, just kind of centered on the panel itself. Okay, I think we got it where I want it. Okay, now I'm just going to take a Sharpie and make a few marks in here, just in the corners, so I know where to put some masking tape underneath. And then we just keep this edge down and fold the top. Away. Oops. I can put some heavier blue tape over those marks. Fold the template back down, back in the same position. Take a pen this time and draw the outlines of all of the placement of the foot pedals. And we can remove the template. So now I'm just going to remove the template completely. Take my 4 foot braces and cut the tape out. Again, just using my very sharp utility knife / craft knife. So the last thing to do is just to do a bit of a scuff inside there. Alright, with all the parts prepped, located, masked off, it's just time to put a little unthickened epoxy here onto the bare wood pieces before installing them with thickened epoxy. So on these holes, we just inject some epoxy and then make sure there are no air bubbles in there by just dipping a little bit of a wire in there. getting the epoxy to float right to the bottom of the hole. And if we fill it up just right, should be a little proud. We can sand that down. And I've thickened up the rest of the epoxy with adhesive fillers, silica, and a little bit of adhesive filler to make a bit of a color, just in case. A little bit of squeeze out doesn't show a big white blob, but will match a little better to the wood itself. And so we're not going to really need any sort of clamping on here. Just going to push this down. Out comes the epoxy. And we'll clean that up. Trying not to get too much into the hole. We'll be drilling that out later on the Orlock blocks. Making sure it's centered in the tape. You don't want any tape being stuck underneath. That's always ends up visible. As long as the epoxy is thick enough and there's not too much of it, no clamping is required. We just push it in place. Tension will just kind of hold it down. I don't have to worry about it moving. And then on the cleats for the rear seat, we have the screws to hold it in place. So the next day, with all the epoxy hardened and all of the masking tape removed, I'm just drilling out the Orlock holes. You'll notice I've got a scrap piece of wood underneath, so I don't have a bunch of blowout as the drill comes through the bottom side. And as always, I appreciate you tuning in. Maybe you want to become a subscriber or hit the bell button so you can stay up to date on this build and other builds in the Orca Boat shop.